So, Rebecca, tell us about this Kony character.
Yeah, this has sort of taken the internet by storm this week. A 30-minute video was published by the charity Invisible Children, and the video encouraged people to join a campaign to bring Joseph Kony to justice. Now, Kony is the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, which is a Christian extremist rebel group who have claimed that their goal is to establish a theocracy in Uganda, and they would base everything on the 10 Commandments, which, yeah, sounds like a great idea. Unfortunately, there are... I was being ironic there just before we get some angry emails.
It's 15 commandments.
They don't do so well at actually following any of the commandments, even the good ones. They are most notable for their sheer brutality and particularly for their use of child soldiers as the bulk of their ranks. The children are kidnapped and the boys brainwashed and the girls used as sex slaves. The child soldiers are then used to conduct terrorist activities throughout Uganda and the surrounding areas. And this has been happening for more than 25 years. So enter Invisible Children with a very slick campaign that quickly went viral on Twitter and Facebook. The video describes Kony's actions and claims that Invisible Children's goal is to make Kony famous so that he can't hide any longer. It's a really beautifully edited video, and they direct people to donate money to their cause and spread awareness. You can write in and get a kit that includes some trendy bracelets, one for you, one to give to a friend to spread the word, and more info on how you can participate. They call out several celebrities and politicians that you can pressure for awareness and to take action. So it caught on so quickly that by the time I woke up yesterday morning, I had several emails from people asking me to watch and learn and donate. I did watch, but while I was really impressed and also moved, I was a little put off because the entire video was very split in terms of race. For instance, black people were either the victims of horrible atrocities or the monster, Joseph Kony, and white people were universally the saviors. Nearly every person in every image who was shown to be helping the cause was a white person. But I was willing to set that aside with the understanding that maybe those whiffs of colonialism and white man's burden were just side effects of a campaign that was aimed at raising awareness amongst a group that otherwise might not care much about the African people. But I started doing a little digging, and as the day wore on, my research got easier and easier and easier, because as the video gained steam online, so did an equal and opposite skeptical response. So by the end of the day, there were articles in the mainstream press that were very critical of the Kony 2012 effort, and a response from Invisible Children, and it had already gone back and forth several times, and it was actually quite impressive to see such an immediate skeptical reaction. And that is I'll just state outright that I'm not talking about any kind of cynical reaction, but a true skeptical reaction that was critically looking at the claims of Invisible Children. So I'll give you a quick overview of some of the criticisms. One of what I feel is one of the lesser criticisms is how Invisible Children operates as a charity. There are some who feel that not enough funds go to actually helping the children who are affected by Kony. And there are a lot of people who feel that Invisible Children isn't trustworthy. And they link to Charity Navigator, which is great for evaluating all kinds of nonprofits. But Charity Navigator gives them 3 out of 4 stars, which is pretty good. They give them 2 out of 4 stars for accountability and transparency, but Invisible Children answered that by saying that's only because they only have 4 independent board members instead of 5, and that they're currently interviewing for a 5th. Invisible Children is also accused of exaggeration and fact manipulation, though it's kind of hard to see how you could exaggerate the crimes of Kony, or if you were able to, what problem that would possibly be. But they are accused of exaggerating his crimes, even though he is admittedly, objectively a monster. But there are facts that the video conveniently downplays or misrepresents that are important, like the fact that Kony isn't even in Uganda anymore, and he hasn't been there for 6 years. And there's also the fact that the Lord's Resistance Army is comprised of a few hundred soldiers, not 30,000 child soldiers as the video represents. That figure comes from the total estimated number of abducted children over the past 30 years, not what they have currently. A much more important criticism, I think, is that Invisible Children created a film that was 30 minutes long, but they still didn't manage to fully articulate what they're asking their Western audience to do. To most people who are caught up in the excitement of the campaign, they're just helping bring a war criminal to justice, which is an action that I think we can all agree is good. But it's also overly simplistic, particularly because the tactics you need to use to bring a war criminal to justice are not simple at all. Invisible Children isn't just asking for people to be aware of Kony. Their goal is to create enough demand for Kony's capture that the U.S. government is pressured into acting. They're very clear in the fact that they want U.S. intervention in Uganda, with U.S. forces supporting the Ugandan military's efforts to capture Kony. And that's not necessarily a great thing. For instance, supporting the Ugandan military means supporting a group that has also been known to rape and kill indiscriminately. They're not necessarily the good guys in the way that the video represents. While Kony's rebels were kidnapping new soldiers, the Ugandan government was forcing northern Ugandans into concentration camps with horrific living conditions and failing to provide adequate protection from Kony.
So they're trying to manipulate the media to get the U.S. to intervene on one side of what's essentially a civil war? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that is a good way to put it. In the video, they name Kony as the sole bad guy, and they completely fail to place him into any kind of context and call the Ugandan government to account, particularly the president, who is Yoweri Museveni. He hasn't stopped Kony despite being in power for more than 25 years now, which happens to be exactly as long as Kony has been waging this war. So will sending in U.S. troops to work with the Ugandan military be a good thing? Who knows? The video also glosses over the fact that Obama already sent troops to Uganda to do that very thing. In 2008, the U.S. Africa Command attempted to find and assassinate Kony at his base in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but that plan was a complete disaster and they didn't even come close. Kony had already left that base long before they even got there. That mission and others have only resulted in more deadly counterstrikes from the LRA, as well as multiple ruined peace talks. Despite that, Obama pledged 100 more troops to the region last year, due mostly to advocacy efforts like Invisible Children's. So what happens if those new U.S. advisors still aren't able to capture Kony? Will the next action involve military strikes? And what happens if they find Kony and he's surrounded by children holding guns? Does the U.S. fire on them? There's a lot of really hard questions that are completely avoided. There's a lot more to the story, and I've skipped some completely valid criticisms of Invisible Children in order to make this as short as possible. I know it's already super long. But hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of how complicated these issues are and how overly simplified Invisible Children has made it seem in order to get Americans excited about a continued U.S. military intervention, which is remarkable, really, since they're getting a huge amount of support from people who probably didn't support U.S. intervention in other recent cases. Because they make it seem like we're watching a genocide happen, like in Rwanda, but that this time we can stop it, if only we send troops. And just to conclude, I'll briefly say that a few people have written in the last day, specifically asking if Invisible Children is running a scam. So I want to be really clear here. I don't think that they're running a scam. In fact, I'm confident that they're not. I think that they really believe in what they're doing and that they believe that military intervention is necessary to capture Kony and bring about some kind of peace. Whether or not that's true, I think is up to each of you to do the research, go beyond the video that you watch, actually learn about what's been happening in Uganda and in surrounding areas, and then decide for yourself whether this is something that you want to support.
Right. But first, you need to be skeptical of the simplistic story that's being circulated on the internet. But it sounds like the real information eventually was there as well.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that it happened pretty quickly. Within the day, there were mainstream publications that were responding with, I think, very well thought out criticisms, not just knee jerk, like, oh, slacktivism, kids getting excited. No, they were true criticisms that I think helped put everything into context.